Hey everyone, my name is Ashley Womack, and this is my final application project. So my audience, my lesson that I decided to do my lesson on is over 12th grade government, U.S. government. As you can see, my learning standards, I chose from a couple of different standards. I ended up choosing standard number 2, which is individuals have rights and responsibilities, and then that benchmark underneath which is a little bit more specific in that standard, is that students will investigate and connect the rights and responsibilities of individuals with contemporary issues. And so the learning objectives then are students will be able to organize information over the United States immigration system and its possible solutions. And then students will be able to present which immigration policy they believe is the best for the United States. And I chose these objectives and this standard sort of to go together with my learning theories because I think they both sort of go well with cognitive and connectivism. Both of them are sort of thinking about what they understand, organizing what they understand, and maybe what they don't, and then trying to put together a final infographic, a final project, and that sort of comes in with that contemporary issues of immigration, which is very much a hot topic and something that is very curious to students, but sometimes, if not most of the time, something that they don't really fully understand. And so those are the learning objectives and standard. And then to go along with that is my learning theory. So I chose 2 to focus on, which is cognitivism and connectivism. Both of these, again, I feel like go really well with this lesson plan or mesh really well with this lesson plan. First of all, the cognitivism, I focusing a lot on that meaningful learning, discovery learning, making it meaningful to them. We could have just sat down and looked at all the different vocabulary for immigration and looked at what our immigration policies look like in the United States. But we took that a step further and we're trying to make it meaningful for them. And they're also using some of that discovery learning and trying to figure out what are some possible solutions to our illegal immigration. So looking at that meaningful learning, that discovery learning, also connectivism. I focus a lot throughout, like this is sort of sprinkled in throughout the lesson. It's not necessarily heavy on one section or the other. Maybe on the last section where they're creating the infographic with a partner and they're having to discuss, they're having to talk, they're having to figure out, okay, what graphic goes well here? Where should we put this piece of text? Where should we put this piece of information? What's the flow of our infographic? How is it going to be the most meaningful in that way? So there's sort of that group collaboration that goes along with the connectivism. And then also just the idea that learning happens outside of just this single individual student. There are several times throughout this lesson where students are, okay, turn to your shoulder partner and talk about what you wrote for this, talk about what you understood from this article. Or, okay, let's have a group discussion to try to talk about what is citizenship? What does citizenship look like in the United States? Or, again, just the having to work with a partner at the end. And so there's a couple of different times that this sort of flows together throughout the theories, but those are the 2 that I will be focusing on throughout the lesson. This is just the quick lesson outline. And I won't read this word for word for you, but I will go through it. So the very first part of the lesson, the students are going to answer a discussion board question. And that discussion board question is, what does citizenship mean? And what does it mean to be an American citizen? And so they have time to sort of work on it, talk about it amongst themselves, think about how they would respond individually. And then I do have them respond as a class. And so I give them some time to sort of hear other people's responses because it is vastly different. You do get to hear some different responses, and students a lot of the times they'll be like, oh yeah, like I thought that, but I didn't put that down, sort of thing. So it gives them some time to hear what other people are saying about these 2 questions, but it also sets the stage for what we're going to be talking about. So sort of opening up that schema of citizenship, what citizenship is, but also adding to it. So like using questioning, which is very a cognitive part of the learning, using questioning to have students access and then utilize that information. It gives them an opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into what they know about American citizenship. And so that sort of that catapults us into this idea of immigration, the topic of immigration into the United States, both legal and illegal immigration. We start off by looking at the legal part of the immigration process. And so I pass out to students the How the United States Immigration System Works article. And this is a pretty lengthy article, which is not always everybody's cup of tea, but I do have the students, as they read through it, they do use close strategy practices. And so I have them put an exclamation point for the information that they found surprising, a question mark over information that they still have questions over, they're confused over. And then for each of the sections, there's different sections in the article, I have them highlight the main takeaways from each section. Okay, so what is this immigration system about, or what does that look like? And so there are 3 different things I'm going to have them do as they go through that lesson, hoping to let them think about and critically analyze what they're going through, and not just reading it and then immediately forgetting what they read. So they're using those close strategies there. So they are questioning what they don't understand and things that stood out to them. They're also using a chunking technique by summarizing long pieces of text into smaller paraphrases, which is again a cognitive strategy. Once they're done with the article, I then have them turn to a shoulder partner and they talk about their highlighted section only. So they get to sort of paraphrase to each other what they learned from each of the sections. And then as a class, we talk about maybe some of the different symbols that they sprinkled out throughout the text. Once they're done with that, we do look at some of the different possible immigration solutions that have been put into place or discussed to maybe help the immigration system work better, or to limit some of the illegal immigration that takes place into the United States. And so really I just like mentioning like the fully open borders, increased border security, amnesty, red card solution, DREAM Act, expanding the H-1B visa program have all been mentioned in the past. And so I give them, like we talk about it a little bit, I define a little bit to them what each one of those is, but then I do have them get with a partner, and they get with a partner and then they sort of decide which one do they think fits our system the best, or maybe works the best, is the best solution to our immigration system. And one of the really cool things about this assignment is that they may pick one, and then they may realize that as they are doing this research that this isn't actually the best one. Maybe there's something else that is better. But it still gives them time to research one that they thought might have been really good, but now it turns out maybe it's not so much. That's part of that discovery learning there also. So I give them the options. I go through the different options with them. They pick their partner. Once they pick their partner, they then pick one of those solutions that we discussed, and then they have to first fill in a graphic organizer. So this graphic organizer ask a couple different questions about their policy. They have to do some pretty specific research about their policy, just to make sure that, hey, are they looking at all angles for immigration? Because again, this is probably something that they haven't really had a whole lot of time to discuss or talk about. And so there's probably angles in regards to immigration that they haven't even thought about. So it gives them a graphic organizer to organize their thoughts, sort of lead them in the right direction of what type of information they want to find in order for them to create a persuasive infographic. And that's sort of the end game to this lesson, is they, with their partner, are going to create an infographic over their policy that they chose to, again, try to persuade the class saying, hey, this is why this policy is the best policy for our immigration system. And then by the end of the lesson, they present to the class, and then the class will vote on which one was the most persuasive. But the infographic part of it is going to be sort of that connectivism. It promotes that group collaboration. that discussion. It looks at different viewpoints, not only maybe the different viewpoint of your partner, but also as they're Googling, as they're researching, they're finding a lot of different viewpoints on different perspectives on that also. Again, it's going to focus more on the idea that the learning doesn't just happen with the individual, it happens outside of the individual, it happens to the individual. And so this is sort of elaborating more on that, the process of connecting. So looking at the assessment, then the assessment is the rubric for the infographic, and I'll show you the rubric in just a second. But looking at the rubric for the infographic, that is the main assessment, but what I'm going to be assessing students over for this lesson. That doesn't mean I'm not going to focus on some of the other different parts of the lesson. I also am going to go back over and look at their discussion board. I'm going to take into account, okay, maybe they wrote a couple of words, maybe a sentence for the discussion board, but did they add to the group discussion? Did they talk more than maybe they wrote? Looking at like the close strategies, reading strategies. Did they add in the highlighting systems? Were they talking with their talking with their shoulder partner? Were they highlighting? Were they putting symbols in their text? Were they able to fill in the graphic organizer with their partner? Did I just see one person doing it, or were they both doing it? Were they collaborating? So a lot of that is just me sort of looking over their shoulder, making sure that they're doing it, sort of check marking it off in my head, or maybe on a piece of paper. But really the main assessment comes from the rubric. So looking at the student materials, I did link in here how the United States immigration system works. I did link in that article if you want to go and look at it. Like I said, it's a pretty lengthy article, but I have the students highlight, question mark, exclamation point, stuff in that information or stuff in that text to make sure that they're understanding the main parts, the bigger parts of that article. And actually, I'll show you what that looks like. So here is how the United States immigration system works. Like I said, it's pretty lengthy, but it does break up like the family-based immigration, the employment-based immigration, so on and so forth. So like I said, pretty lengthy, but it does do a really good job at explaining some of those things. The next student material is the graphic organizer. And so the graphic organizer is there on the right for you. You can see sort of the questions that I asked the students, looking at national security, looking at opportunities for immigration, the economy, the citizenship, and then like the workforce, because the workforce taking jobs away is always the biggest statement for immigration. And so this allows students to organize their information and focus on the information that is going to be important for when they research on their immigration policy. And if you take a look at the graphic organizer, I do sort of start with like easy, okay, what is the central goal of this policy on immigration? Is it to completely close borders? Is it to open them up all the way? Is it to allow more employment-based or family-based immigration into the United States? And so that just sort of helps students set that goal, set that standard for their policy. And then as you go down, the research, the questions do get a little bit more difficult. It makes them really think about what their policy is trying to do, the goal of their policy is trying to do. And so it starts off again with sort of those easier classifications all the way down to those more difficult classifications. And that graphic organizer is to help with that meaningful learning, with that cognitivism. The next one is the assessment. So this is the rubric that I would use to grade the students on. You have design, you have content, clarity, representation, all of that fun stuff in there. And they have an idea of what's going to be graded for them. What are they going to be docked for if they do that? One of the big things that I do focus on is that if the students maybe don't do as well on their infographic, they don't meet the standards on this rubric, one thing that you could do is you could allow them to go in and redo that But before they do that, you must check their graphic organizer. Did they fill out the graphic organizer? Did they do it well? Are they missing spots? And because probably some of the missing or lack of information from their graphic organizer is probably one of the reasons why their infographic did not succeed as well. And so that's one thing that you could also do to help that improvement plan, or put students on improvement plan there, is have them go back and do their graphic organizer and get your okay before having to make corrections again.